A sweltering Tuesday in July proved that arrogance often blinds justice. Wade Harlan saw a black woman driving a vintage Mercedes and immediately assumed she was a suspect, never realizing she was a grieving mother with a powerful son. What began as a routine traffic stop in sleepy Georgia quickly spiraled into a corruption scandal that shattered the entire police department. You are about to hear the true story of how one cop picked a fight with the wrong black widow and how the karma that followed didn't just hit him, it buried him. Buckle up for his total destruction. The heat in Silverlake, Georgia, rose off the asphalt in shimmering waves, distorting the air like a funhouse mirror. It was the kind of humidity that made your shirt stick to your back the second you stepped outside. Officer Wade Harlan sat in his cruiser, idling behind a billboard that advertised fast cash for houses. The air conditioning in his patrol car was blasting, but Wade was sweating, not from the heat, but from the boredom. He was a 7-year veteran of the Silverlake Police Department, a man who wore his badge like a crown and his gun like a scepter. He had a reputation in the precinct, the Hammer, his buddies called him. To the locals in the lower income neighborhoods, he was something else entirely, a predator. Wade checked his radar gun. Traffic was light, mostly soccer moms and SUVs and contractors and beat-up pickups. Boring. Then he saw it. A pristine cherry red 1969 Mercedes-Benz 280 SL convertible was gliding down Main Street. It was a collector's dream, the chrome gleaming under the ruthless sun. The top was down. Wade sat up straighter. "Well, hello there," he muttered, shifting into drive. The driver was a black woman. She looked to be in her late 50s or early 60s, wearing a wide-brimmed black hat and oversized sunglasses. She drove with a casual, easy elegance, one hand resting lightly on the wheel. To Wade, the math didn't add up. That car was worth upwards of $100,000. The woman driving it didn't look like the demographics of Silver Lake's wealthy elite, at least not in Wade's world. "Stolen," he whispered to himself, or maybe the maid took the boss's toy for a joyride. He didn't run the plates. He didn't have probable cause. He didn't care. He pulled out from behind the billboard, the powerful engine of his cruiser growling as he closed the distance. He tailed her for 2 blocks, waiting for a mistake, a swerve, a rolling stop, a failure to signal. She drove perfectly. She signaled a full 3 seconds before turning left onto Oakwood Drive, a street lined with weeping willows and old colonial houses. She maintained the speed limit of 25 miles per hour exactly. Wade's jaw tightened. Her perfection irritated him. It felt defiant. He flipped the lights. Whoop, whoop. Ahead, the red Mercedes slowed immediately and pulled over to the curb with practiced calm. No panic, no sudden braking. Wade put the cruiser in park. He adjusted his belt, tapping the body camera that he had forgotten to turn on 3 times last month. This time, he left it off. He wanted to have a chat first. He wanted to see the fear in her eyes before he decided how this was going to go. He walked up to the passenger side window, hand resting near his holster. A power move. The woman turned her head. Up close, she was striking. High cheekbones, skin the color of deep mahogany, and lips painted a dark, tasteful plum. She wore a black dress with a high collar despite the heat. "License and registration," Wade barked, skipping the greeting. The woman lowered her sunglasses just enough to look over the rim. Her eyes were sharp, intelligent, and utterly unimpressed. "Good afternoon to you too, officer," she said. Her voice was like smooth jazz, low and textured but with a steel core. "May I ask why I've been pulled over?" "You failed to signal a lane change back on Main," Wade lied. It was effortless for him. I haven't changed lanes since I left my driveway, officer, she replied calmly, and I signaled my turn onto Oakwood. Wade leaned in, the scent of expensive leather and lavender wafting from the car. I didn't ask for a debate. License and registration now. The woman sighed, a sound of profound exhaustion rather than fear. She reached slowly towards the glove box. Watch the hands, Wade shouted, his hand snapping to his gun grip. She froze. I am reaching for the documents you requested, young man. Do not scream at me. Don't tell me what to do, Wade snarled. Get them slowly. She retrieved a leather pouch and handed it over. Wade snatched it. He looked at the name on the license. Vivienne Caldwell. The name meant nothing to him. He glanced at the registration. The car belonged to a Reginald Caldwell. Who's Reginald? Wade asked, his tone accusing. My late husband, Vivienne said softly. She looked straight ahead, her hands returning to the 10 and 2 position on the wheel. Uh-huh, late husband, Wade scoffed. And let me guess, you're just taking it out to keep the battery charged. I am driving to the cemetery, she said. Today is the first anniversary of his passing. Wade looked at her black dress. The story fit, but his ego wouldn't let him back down. He felt small next to this woman's composure. He wanted to crack it. He wanted to see her plead. Step out of the vehicle, Miss Caldwell. Vivienne turned to him fully now. For what reason, officer? I have provided my identification. The car is registered to me as the surviving spouse. I have broken no laws. I smell alcohol, Wade lied again. The only thing he smelled was lavender and his own cheap deodorant. Step out of the car or I will drag you out. Vivienne stared at him for a long 5 seconds. She seemed to be calculating something, her eyes scanning his badge number, 492. Very well, she said. She opened the door and stepped out. She was taller than he expected, wearing modest black heels. She stood by the pristine red convertible, a picture of dignity in the face of indignity. Turn around, hands on the hood, Wade commanded. Is this necessary? Do it. She turned. She placed her manicured hands on the hot red metal. Wade moved behind her, patting her down aggressively, far rougher than protocol dictated. He kicked her feet apart. You're making a mistake, Officer 492, she whispered. The only mistake was you thinking you could drive through my town like you own it, Wade hissed in her ear. You people always think the rules don't apply to you once you get a little money. There it was. The mask was off. Wade grabbed her wrists and slapped the cuffs on. They were tight. Too tight. He heard her wince, a sharp intake of breath, but she didn't cry out. You're under arrest, Wade announced, spinning her around. For what? She asked, her voice trembling slightly with rage, not fear. Disorderly conduct, resisting arrest, and we'll see what else we find when we search this fancy car. He marched her toward his cruiser. Neighbors were coming out onto their porches now. A woman in a jogging suit held up her phone, filming. Wade glared at her, but didn't stop. He shoved Vivienne into the back seat of the cruiser, the hard plastic jarring her hip. As he slammed the door, Vivienne looked through the wire mesh. She didn't look like a criminal. She looked like a queen in a cage, waiting for her army. Wade got into the front seat, feeling the adrenaline rush of dominance. He picked up his radio. Dispatch, this is Unit 4 Alpha, bringing one in. Female resisting, possible DUI. He put the car in gear. He felt good. He felt powerful. He had no idea that the woman in his back seat had just memorized his face, his badge number, and the time of day, and was currently praying for his soul, because she knew her son wasn't going to show him any mercy. The ride to the precinct was short and silent. Vivienne sat in the back, the handcuffs biting into her wrists. The air conditioning in the back of the cruiser was non-existent, the plexiglass partition sealing her in a hot box. Sweat trickled down her temple, ruining her makeup, but she refused to wipe it against her shoulder. She sat upright. She closed her eyes and thought of Reginald. "Reggie, give me strength. Do not let me lose my temper with this boy." Reginald Caldwell had been a legend in Silverlake, not because he was rich, though his construction firm had built half the county, but because he was fair. He had been a city councilman for 20 years. He had coached Little League. He had paid for the library renovation. When he died of a sudden heart attack a year ago, the whole town had shut down. But Officer Wade Harlan was new to the area, a transfer from a precinct 3 counties over, brought in by a chief who promised to clean up the streets. Wade didn't know the history. He only saw skin color and tax brackets. They pulled into the sally port of the Silverlake Police Department. The heavy garage door rattled shut behind them, blocking out the sun. Wade hauled Vivienne out of the car. Her legs were stiff. "Move it," he grunted, guiding her by the elbow towards the booking desk. The station smelled of stale coffee and floor wax. The booking sergeant, a heavy-set man named Dorsey with a mustard stain on his uniform shirt, looked up from his computer. He blinked when he saw Vivienne. "Wade, what do you have there?" Dorsey asked, his brow furrowing. He squinted at Vivienne. There was a flicker of recognition in his eyes, but he couldn't quite place her. "DUI resisting disorderly," Wade rattled off, pushing Vivienne towards the counter. Found her swerving all over Oakwood in a vintage convertible. "Probably stolen. Haven't verified the VIN yet." Dorsey looked at Vivienne. He saw the pearls, the dress, the calm demeanor. "Ma'am," Dorsey asked hesitantly, "have you been drinking?" "I have had nothing but tea and water today, Sergeant," Vivienne said clearly. "I was on my way to the Heavenly Rest Cemetery to visit my husband's grave. Officer Harlan pulled me over, refused to tell me why, and then arrested me when I asked for clarification." Wade slammed his hand on the counter. She was belligerent. "Dorsey, book her." Dorsey looked nervous. "Wade, maybe we should book her." Wade leaned over the desk, his voice dropping. "Unless you want the chief to know you're going soft on suspects." Dorsey sighed and started typing. "Name?" "Vivienne Caldwell." Dorsey's fingers paused over the keyboard. He looked up sharply. "Caldwell? Related to Reggie Caldwell?" "My husband," Vivienne corrected. "My late husband." Dorsey swallowed hard. He looked at Wade. "Wade, this is Reggie Caldwell's widow. You know, the guy who the high school stadium is named after." Wade shrugged, unbothered. "Dead husband doesn't give you a free pass to drive drunk. Process her. I'm going to inventory the car." "I demand my phone call," Vivienne said. Her voice cut through the noise of the station. "After booking," Wade spat over his shoulder as he walked away. Dorsey finished the paperwork in silence. He was gentle when he took her fingerprints. He didn't make her look at the camera for the mugshot. He just took it quickly. "I'm sorry about this, Mrs. Caldwell," Dorsey whispered as he handed her a wet wipe for the ink. "Harlan, he's intense." "He's a bigot," Vivienne corrected, wiping her hands. "And he is going to regret this day." Dorsey led her to a holding cell. It was empty, thankfully. A concrete bench and a stainless steel toilet. He uncuffed her. Vivienne rubbed her wrists. Deep red welts were already forming. "Your call," Dorsey said, handing her a phone through the bars. 5 minutes. Vivienne dialed a number she knew by heart. It rang twice. This is Caldwell, a deep baritone voice answered. It was sharp, professional, and busy. Terrance, Vivienne said. Her voice cracked just a fraction. The silence on the other end was instantaneous. The professional edge vanished, replaced by intense alertness. Mama, what's wrong? Why are you calling from... Is that a landline? I'm at the Silverlake police station, she said, steadying herself. I've been arrested. Say that again. And the voice was deadly quiet now. I was driving your father's car to the cemetery. An Officer Harlan pulled me over. He said I was swerving. He said I smelled like alcohol. He was aggressive, Terrance. He put me in cuffs. He hurt my wrists. He put his hands on you. Yes. Are you booked? Yes, I'm in a cell. Okay. The sound of a chair scraping back, keys jingling, and heavy footsteps echoed through the phone. Mama, listen to me. Do not say another word. Not one word. Do not sign anything. Do not accept water from them unless it's sealed. I am leaving the office now. Terrance, you're in D.C. That's hours away. I'm not in D.C. today, Terrance said. I'm in Atlanta. I was meeting with the governor. I'll be there soon. Sit tight. And Mama. Yes, baby. Pray for Officer Harlan. The line went dead. Vivienne handed the phone back to Dorsey. She walked to the concrete bench, smoothed her black dress, and sat down. She folded her hands in her lap. Outside the cell, the station hummed with activity. Wade came back in, swinging a keychain. Her husband's keys. Found a flask in the glove box, Wade announced loudly, holding up a silver flask. Empty. Smells like whiskey. Open and shut case. Dorsey looked at the flask. Wade, that's an antique. It's engraved to Reggie Love Viv, 1985. Open container is open container. Wade grinned. She probably chugged it before I got to the window. He walked over to the cell bars and looked at Vivienne. She didn't look up. She was staring at the wall, meditating. Not so talkative now, huh? Wade taunted. Where's that attitude? Where's that do you know who I am crap? Vivienne slowly lifted her head. Her eyes were dry. I never asked if you knew who I was, Officer Harlan, she said softly. I know exactly who I am. The question is, do you know who you just started a war with? Wade laughed, a loud, barking laugh. Lady, I am the law in this town. Your war is over before it started. He walked away, whistling. He sat down at his desk and started typing up the arrest report, embellishing the details. He added slurred speech, bloodshot eyes, and hostile demeanor. He was building a masterpiece of fiction. The front doors of the Silverlake Police Department didn't just open. They were thrown open with enough force that the glass rattled in the frames. The station went quiet. A man strode in. He was 6 feet 4 inches, built like a linebacker, wearing a charcoal gray suit that cost more than Wade made in 3 months. He moved with a terrifying predatory grace. He wasn't alone. Flanking him were 2 men in dark suits with earpieces, and behind them a woman carrying a briefcase. Sergeant Dorsey stood up, his mouth opening. The man in the charcoal suit ignored the desk. He walked straight into the middle of the bullpen and stopped. He scanned the room, his eyes landing on Wade Harlan. Who is the watch commander? The man bellowed. His voice shook the coffee in the mugs. Lieutenant Leland Briggs, a balding man with a mustache, poked his head out of his office. Who the hell are you? You can't just barge in here. The man pulled a leather wallet from his jacket pocket and flipped it open. A gold badge caught the overhead fluorescent lights. It wasn't a police badge, it was federal. I am Terrance Caldwell, the man said, his voice echoing off the walls. Deputy Assistant Attorney General for the Civil Rights Division. And you have my mother in a cage?" Wade stopped typing. The cursor on his screen blinked. Blink, blink, blink. Terrance Caldwell turned his gaze to Wade. It wasn't anger in his eyes. It was something worse. It was total, absolute destruction. "Open that cell," Terrance said, pointing a finger at Dorsey. "Now." The silence in the precinct was heavy, the kind of silence that precedes a bomb blast. Sergeant Dorsey scrambled for the keys, his hands shaking so badly he dropped them once before jamming the brass key into the lock of the holding cell. The metallic clank of the door sliding open echoed through the room. Vivienne Caldwell stood up. She didn't rush. She smoothed her dress again, picked up her hat, and walked out of the cell with her head high. She stepped past Dorsey and stopped in front of her son. Terrance Caldwell, the man who made senators nervous and corporate CEOs sweat, looked at his mother. His eyes, previously cold and hard as flint, softened instantly. He gently took her hands. He saw the red, angry welts where the handcuffs had bitten into her skin. The skin was broken in one place. A muscle in Terrance's jaw jumped. It was a spasm of pure, unadulterated rage. "Did he do this?" Terrance asked, his voice barely a whisper. "He said I was resisting," Vivienne replied, her voice steady. "He said I was disorderly." Terrance turned slowly. He didn't look at Lieutenant Briggs. He looked at Officer Wade Harlan. Wade was standing by his desk, arms crossed, trying to look bored, but the sweat on his forehead betrayed him. He knew what a deputy assistant attorney general was. He knew that was way above his pay grade. "You," Terrance said. Wade swallowed. "She was non-compliant. Protocol says—" "Protocol?" Terrance cut him off, stepping closer. The air seemed to leave the room. "Protocol dictates that you assess a threat. You looked at a 62-year-old widow on her way to mourn her husband. And you saw a threat? No, you saw a target. She was drunk," Wade blurted out, pointing at the evidence bag on his desk. "We found a flask. It smelled of whiskey." Terrance looked at the flask. He walked over to the desk, his movements fluid and precise. He picked up the evidence bag. "This flask?" Terrance asked. "The one that's been sitting in a display case in my father's study for 20 years. The one that has been dry since the Reagan administration." "It smelled of alcohol," Wade insisted, though his voice wavered. "We'll see," Terrance said. He turned to the woman with the briefcase who had arrived with him. "Nadia, I want this flask impounded by our office for independent forensic analysis. If there is a drop of alcohol in it, I'll eat it. If there isn't, I'm adding fabrication of evidence to the list of charges." "You can't take evidence," Lieutenant Briggs shouted, finally finding his voice. "This is a Silverlake investigation." Terrance laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. "Lieutenant, as of 5 minutes ago, this is no longer a Silverlake investigation. This is a potential federal civil rights violation under Title 18, Section 242, deprivation of rights under color of law. I am taking jurisdiction." "You can't just—" "I just did," Terrance snapped. "And right now, I am taking my mother to Silverlake General Hospital. We are going to get a blood panel done immediately. We will test for alcohol, drugs, and anything else you want. And when it comes back clean, and it will, I am going to attach that medical report to the lawsuit I am filing against this department, this city, and you personally, Officer Harlan." Terrance walked back to his mother and draped his suit jacket over her shoulders. "Let's go, Mama." "Wait," Wade said, stepping forward, his hand foolishly drifting toward his belt. "She's not processed. You can't just walk her out." The two Secret Service-looking men who had flanked Terrance stepped forward in unison. They didn't draw weapons. They just occupied the space, creating a wall of muscle between Wade and Terrance. Terrance paused at the door. He looked back at Wade. "Officer Harlan," Terrance said, savoring the name. "Go home. Kiss your wife. Hug your kids. Because I promise you, by the time I'm done with you, you won't be able to get a job as a mall security guard in this state. You picked the wrong family." Terrance guided his mother out into the blinding afternoon sun. As the heavy doors swung shut, Lieutenant Briggs turned to Wade. His face was purple. "You better pray she was drunk," Briggs hissed, "because if she wasn't, that man is going to dismantle this precinct brick by brick to get to you." Wade stared at the door. "She was," he muttered, trying to convince himself. "She had to be. Nobody drives that perfect unless they're hiding something." But deep down, in the pit of his stomach, Wade felt a cold stone of dread. He realized he had forgotten to ask the most important question during the stop. "Who are you?" And now the answer was coming for him. The Caldwell residence, a sprawling estate on the outskirts of town, had been transformed into a war room. Vivienne was resting in the living room, an ice pack on her wrists, sipping tea. She refused to go to bed. She wanted to see this through. Terrance sat at the dining room table, his laptop open. He had loosened his tie, but his intensity hadn't waned. Nadia, his legal aide, was on the phone with a judge in Atlanta. The two security specialists were setting up a perimeter around the house, ensuring no local police tried to follow up or harass them. "Blood work is back," Nadia said, covering the phone's mouthpiece. 0.00, not a trace of alcohol. Not even cough syrup. Terrance nodded. "Scan it. Send it to the chief of police and the mayor. CC the local news stations." "The flask." "Lab says it's dry, dust inside. The whiskey smell Harlan claimed was probably the old residue in the leather casing, or he made it up entirely." Terrance rubbed his temples. He had the proof of innocence. Now he needed the proof of malice. "I need the dash cam," Terrance said. "And the body cam." "They're stalling," Nadia replied. "Briggs says there was a technical malfunction with the upload." "Of course there was," Terrance sneered. "Standard playbook, malfunction, corrupted file. Forgot to turn it on. They're going to bury it." He typed furiously. "I'm going to file a subpoena for the raw server data. If they deleted it, there will be a digital footprint. Deleting federal evidence carries a 20-year sentence." Just then, his phone buzzed. It was a text from his younger brother, Desmond, who was a tech entrepreneur in California. "Check your email." "You're welcome." Terrance frowned and opened his email. There was a link to a cloud file. He clicked it. A video player popped up. The angle was shaky, filmed from a porch or a sidewalk, likely on a smartphone. "I'm filming this," a woman's voice whispered behind the camera. "He's being so aggressive." On the screen, Terrance saw his mother's red Mercedes. He saw Wade Harlan. The video was clear enough. It showed the entire interaction after the car stopped. It showed Vivienne complying. It showed Wade screaming. It showed Wade yanking the door open. Terrance watched, his blood boiling as Wade kicked his mother's legs apart. "You're making a mistake, officer." The audio picked up Vivienne's voice. "The only mistake was you thinking you could drive through my town like you own it." Wade's voice was loud, clear, and dripping with hate. "You people always think the rules don't apply to you once you get a little money." Terrance froze the video. "Nadia," he called out, "come look at this." Nadia walked over and watched the clip. Her eyes went wide. "Is that the jogger?" Terrance said, remembering the police report mentioned a bystander. "Harlan thought she was just a nuisance. She was a witness and she uploaded this to the neighborhood watch group. Desmond scrubbed it before the admins could take it down. He said, "You people," Nadia noted, her lawyer brain activating. That establishes racial bias. That moves it from excessive force to a hate crime enhancement. Terrance leaned back. It proves he didn't pull her over for driving. He pulled her over because he didn't like seeing a black woman in a Benz. This video is gold, Terrance. We win the lawsuit with this. I don't just want to win the lawsuit, Terrance said darkly. I want a clean house. He stood up and walked to the window. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the lawn. Start digging into Officer Harlan's history, Terrance commanded, not just Silverlake. Where was he before? Why did he transfer? You don't develop an ego like that overnight. He's done this before. Nadia started typing. I'm accessing the interstate personnel records. Okay, here we go. He was with the county sheriff's department for 5 years before transferring to Silverlake. Any complaints? 7, Nadia said, scrolling. Excessive force, profiling, verbal abuse, all dismissed or unsubstantiated by internal affairs. 7 complaints in 5 years, Terrance mused, and Silverlake hired him anyway. It looks like... Wait. Nadia squinted at the screen. The sheriff at his old precinct is the brother-in-law of the chief of police here in Silverlake. It was a favor hire. They shuffled a bad apple to a new barrel. Terrance smiled, but it wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of a hunter who just found the trail. So, it's not just a racist cop, Terrance said. It's a nepotism hire protected by a corrupt chief. This isn't a traffic stop anymore, Nadia. This is a RICO case. This is a conspiracy. He turned back to the table. Upload the video, Terrance said. To the court server? No, Terrance said. To the world. Put it on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook. Send it to CNN, Fox, MSNBC, and the Shade Room. Let's see how Chief Finch likes his technical malfunction when it's trending on Twitter. Terrance, Vivienne said from the couch. She was watching him. Be careful. When you corner a rat, it bites. I know, Mama, Terrance said, closing his laptop. But I'm not the one trapped in the corner. They are. The video titled, Grandmother Arrested for Driving While Black in Silverlake, was live. It had views. The hashtag Justice for Vivienne was trending #1 in the country. And in his small apartment on the other side of town, Officer Wade Harlan sat on his couch, a beer in his hand, staring at his phone. His face was pale. The comments were scrolling by faster than he could read them. Badge 492 needs to go to jail. Fire him. Who is this guy? Wade Harlan. Address found? Wade dropped his phone. It wasn't just his career ending. It was his life imploding. He grabbed his service weapon, checking the safety, paranoia setting in. He thought he was the hunter. He had no idea he had just become the most hunted man in America. The karma wasn't just coming. It had arrived and it brought the internet with it. The sun rose over Silverlake the next morning, but it brought no light to the Silverlake Police Department. It brought a siege. When Chief of Police Harlan Finch pulled into his reserved spot, he couldn't even get to the door. The sidewalk was choked with news vans. CNN, Fox News, local affiliates, and independent streamers with selfie sticks were swarming the entrance. The viral video had hit millions of views overnight. Finch, a thick-necked man with a buzz cut and a history of making problems disappear, pushed his way through the crowd, ignoring the microphones shoved in his face. Chief, is Officer Harlan still on duty? Chief, do you condone racial profiling? Chief, is it true the Department of Justice is opening a file? Finch slammed the station door behind him. The station was in chaos. Phones were ringing off the hook, a constant shrill scream of public outrage. "Get Harlan in my office now." Finch barked at Lieutenant Briggs. Wade Harlan walked in. He looked like a ghost. His eyes were bloodshot, his uniform rumpled. He hadn't slept. People had been driving by his house all night, honking horns and shouting. Someone had thrown a brick through his mailbox. "You idiot," Finch said, not looking up from his desk. "You absolute, unmitigated—" "Chief, I followed procedure," Wade stammered, his voice thin. "She was—" "Shut up," Finch roared, slamming his hand on the desk. "She wasn't resisting. She wasn't drunk. She was Vivienne Caldwell. Do you know who that is? That is the widow of the man who approved the budget for this building and her son. Her son is the federal government." Finch stood up and walked to the window, peering through the blinds at the media circus outside. "You didn't just pull over a black woman, Wade. You pulled over a political dynasty, and you got caught on camera saying, you people. There is no spin for that. There is no PR move that fixes that. So, what do?" Wade asked, desperation creeping in. "The union rep?" "The union can't save you from a viral video," Finch said coldly. "I'm putting you on administrative leave, unpaid, effective immediately. Surrender your badge and gun." Wade felt like he'd been punched in the gut. "Unpaid? Chief, I have a mortgage. My wife is pregnant. You can't just cut me loose. I did what you guys always said. Be aggressive. Dominate the stop. I was doing the job." Finch turned slowly. His eyes were like shark eyes, dead and dangerous. "Are you implying that I told you to target innocent women and violate their civil rights? Be very careful, Officer Harlan. If you go down that road, you won't just lose your job. You'll lose your freedom. This is your mess. You clean it up." Wade handed over his gun and badge with shaking hands. He walked out of the office, past the other officers, who suddenly found the floor very interesting. No one looked him in the eye. He was already a leper. Meanwhile, across town, the real storm was brewing. Terrance Caldwell stood on the steps of the federal courthouse in Atlanta, surrounded by a phalanx of microphones. He looked immaculate in a navy suit, the image of righteous power. Vivienne stood next to him, wearing white, a symbol of purity and innocence. She looked regal, untouched by the grime of the previous day. "Yesterday," Terrance began, his voice booming without a microphone, "the Silverlake Police Department didn't just arrest my mother. They arrested the wrong idea. They operated under the assumption that dignity is a privilege reserved for a specific demographic. They were wrong." He held up a thick file folder. "We are not just filing a civil suit for false arrest and excessive force," Terrance continued. "This morning, I formally requested a Department of Justice investigation into the pattern and practice of the Silverlake Police Department. We believe Officer Harlan is not an anomaly. He is a symptom of a diseased culture." The reporters scribbled furiously. "We have uncovered records," Terrance said, dropping the bombshell, "that show a 400% increase in traffic stops involving minority drivers in Silverlake since Chief Finch took office. We have found that Officer Harlan had 7 prior complaints at his old precinct, complaints that were buried by a sheriff who was Chief Finch's brother-in-law." A collective gasp went through the press pool. "This is not an accident," Terrance concluded, staring directly into the camera lens, speaking to Wade and Finch. "This is a conspiracy of nepotism and racism, and we are going to burn it to the ground." Back at his house, Wade watched the press conference on TV. He saw the file folder. He heard the mention of his old complaints, the ones he thought were gone forever. His phone buzzed. It was his wife, Mallory. She was at her mother's house. "I'm not coming home, Wade. The news vans are on the lawn. My dad says you're going to prison. I can't have the baby around this. Wade threw the phone across the room. It smashed against the wall. He put his head in his hands. The system he had served, the system he had protected, was now collapsing on top of him, and he was the only one standing in the rubble. The heat had broken, replaced by a gray, drizzling rain that matched the mood in Silverlake. The town was different now. Federal agents and windbreakers were a common sight, walking in and out of the precinct with boxes of files. The city council was holding emergency meetings. Wade Harlan sat in a small, windowless conference room in a law office in downtown Atlanta. He looked 10 years older. He had lost weight. His clean-cut cop haircut had grown out, shaggy and unkempt. Across the table sat Terrance Caldwell. Next to him was Nadia, the legal shark, and a court reporter typing silently on a stenotype machine. This was the deposition. Wade's lawyer, a union-appointed attorney named Mr. Whitaker, looked bored. He checked his watch every few minutes. He had already told Wade to just plead the fifth to everything. "State your name for the record," Terrance said. He didn't look angry anymore. He looked surgical. "Wade Harlan." "Mr. Harlan," Terrance said, opening a binder. "Let's talk about the day of July 12th. Why did you pull over my mother?" "On advice of counsel, I invoke my Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination," Wade mumbled, reciting the line he'd been fed. Terrance nodded, expecting this. "Okay, let's try something else. Let's talk about the luxury tax." Wade's head snapped up. Mr. Whitaker stopped checking his watch. "I don't know what you're talking about," Wade said. "Fifth Amendment, Wade," Whitaker hissed. "No, I want to hear this," Terrance said, leaning forward. "We have the emails, Wade. We subpoenaed the server before Chief Finch could wipe it. We found the email threads between the chief and the patrol supervisors discussing revenue generation targets, specifically targeting out-of-town luxury vehicles, impounding them for investigation, and charging $4,000 in administrative fees to release them." Wade's heart hammered against his ribs. "My mother wasn't just a traffic stop," Terrance said softly. "You were going to seize the car, weren't you? A 1969 Mercedes 280 SL worth $120,000. You arrest her for DUI, impound the car. If she fights it, it costs her thousands. If she doesn't, the department eventually petitions for forfeiture. It's a racket. It's highway robbery with a badge." Terrance slid a piece of paper across the table. It was a list of names. "These are the 19 other people you pulled over in the last 6 months. All out-of-towners, all luxury cars, all suspected DUI, but no breathalyzer given. All paid huge fines to get their charges dropped and cars released." Wade looked at the list. He saw the dates. He saw his own signature on the arrest reports. "Mr. Whitaker," Terrance said, turning to the union lawyer, "you represent the police union, which includes Chief Finch, correct?" "I represent Officer Harlan," Whitaker said stiffly. "Do you?" Terrance smiled. "Because it seems to me that Chief Finch is the architect of this scheme. And right now, Officer Harlan is the one facing 20 years for federal civil rights violations and racketeering. Is the chief facing charges? No, just Wade." Terrance turned back to Wade. The room was deadly quiet. "Wade," Terrance said, dropping the formality. "The feds are issuing indictments on Friday. They are going to hang this entire scheme on you. They will say you were a rogue cop. They will say you went off the reservation. Chief Finch will testify against you. He will say he never ordered this. He will walk away with his pension and you will go to federal prison where, let's be honest, ex-cops don't last long." Wade looked at Whitaker. The lawyer refused to meet his eye. Whitaker was there to contain the damage, not to save Wade. "What do you want?" Wade whispered. "I want the architect," Terrance said. "I don't want the hammer. I want the hand that swings it." Terrance pulled a document out of his briefcase. It wasn't a lawsuit. It was a plea deal. "Full immunity from federal prosecution," Terrance said, "in exchange for full testimony against Chief Finch, Lieutenant Briggs, and the corrupt sheriff who hired you. You walk away. You lose your badge. You can never be a cop again, but you stay out of prison. You get to see your kid grow up." "Wade, don't listen to him," Whitaker snapped. "This is a trick. We can fight this." "Fight it with what?" Wade yelled, slamming his hand on the table. "You guys hung me out to dry. I did exactly what Finch told me to do. Tag him and bag him, that's what he said." Whitaker stood up. "I cannot continue to represent this client if he refuses to follow legal advice." "Then get out," Wade said, his voice trembling with rage. "You're fired." Whitaker gathered his things and stormed out. Wade was alone with the wolves, but for the first time he realized the wolves weren't the ones across the table. The wolves were the ones wearing the same uniform he did. Wade looked at Terrance. He looked at the photo of his pregnant wife he kept in his wallet. The wife who wouldn't speak to him. "The chief keeps a ledger," Wade said. His voice was steady now. "Not on the server. A physical ledger in a safe in his basement. It tracks the split of the forfeiture money. Who gets what kickback? The sheriff gets 20%. The mayor gets 10%. Terrance's eyes narrowed. This was bigger than he thought. "Can you tell us where the safe is?" "I can do better," Wade said, a dark, vindictive look crossing his face. "I moved the safe for him last month when he got his floors redone. I know the combination." Terrance Caldwell sat back in his chair. He didn't smile. This wasn't a game, but he knew in that moment that the war was over. He had just nuked the entire town's leadership. "Nadia," Terrance said quietly, "call the FBI. Tell them to get a warrant for Chief Finch's basement and tell them to bring a battering ram." As the rain fell outside, Wade Harlan began to talk. He talked for hours. He spilled every secret, every dirty deal, every planted evidence bag. He destroyed his own brotherhood to save his own skin. It was the ultimate act of cowardice, perhaps. Or maybe for the first time in his life, it was an act of justice. Friday morning came with the sound of helicopters. Chief Finch was in his bathrobe pouring his first cup of coffee when the front door of his colonial-style home exploded inward. He didn't even have time to drop the mug before 6 FBI agents in tactical gear were in his kitchen. "Federal agents, get on the ground now." Finch froze. He looked at the window. Outside, armored vehicles were parked on his manicured lawn. Neighbors were peeking through their curtains. "On the ground?" Finch dropped to his knees, the coffee spilling across the linoleum, a dark stain spreading like the corruption he had fostered. "Harlan Finch, you're under arrest for racketeering, wire fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy to deprive civil rights," a tall agent announced, snapping the cuffs on. Simultaneously across town, the mayor was being escorted out of City Hall in handcuffs. The sheriff in the neighboring county, Finch's brother-in-law, was pulled over in his patrol car and arrested by state troopers, working with the feds. It was a clean sweep. The ledger Wade had described was exactly where he said it would be, in the walls safe behind a fake electrical panel in Finch's basement. It was a handwritten account of every illegal seizure, every bribe, every favor done for the last 10 years. It implicated judges, city council members, and half the command staff of the police department. By noon, the Silverlake Police Department had effectively ceased to exist. The building was a crime scene. The officers who weren't arrested were confined to the break room, stripped of their weapons, waiting to be interviewed. Terrance Caldwell watched the news from his mother's living room. He didn't cheer. He just nodded, a grim satisfaction on his face. "It's done," he said to Vivienne. "The governor just announced he's dissolving the Silverlake Police Department. The county police will take over patrol duties until a new vetted force can be built. Finch is looking at 30 years. The mayor is looking at 15. Vivienne sat in her armchair looking out at the garden. The red Mercedes was parked in the driveway, gleaming in the sun. "And the boy?" she asked. "Officer Harlan?" "He took the plea," Terrance said. "He testified against everyone. He's free, legally speaking. But he's finished. He's barred from law enforcement for life. He's a snitch. No one in this town will hire him. He'll have to leave." Vivienne nodded slowly. "Good. Hate is a heavy burden to carry, Terrance. Let him carry it somewhere else." The seasons had changed. The humid Georgia summer had given way to a crisp, golden autumn. Vivienne Caldwell pulled her red Mercedes into the parking lot of a budget auto parts store on the edge of town. She needed a new wiper blade, and she preferred to do things herself rather than ask Terrance, who was back in D.C. fighting bigger battles. She walked into the store, the bell above the door chiming. The smell of rubber and oil filled the air. "Can I help you find something?" a voice asked from the aisle. The voice was flat, tired, defeated. Vivienne froze. She knew that voice. She turned slowly. Standing there wearing a green vest with a name tag that read, "Trainee," was Wade Harlan. He looked terrible. He had gained weight. His eyes were sunken, dark circles bruising the skin beneath them. He held a price gun in his hand, like a weapon he didn't know how to use. Wade looked up and saw her. The color drained from his face. He dropped the price gun. It clattered on the floor. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The dynamic had flipped so completely it was dizzying. He had held her life in his hands on the side of a road. Now he was stocking shelves, and she was the pillar of the community who had brought down his entire world. Wade's mouth opened, but no words came out. What could he say? "I'm sorry. I didn't mean it. It was all useless." Vivienne looked at him. She looked at the cheap vest. She looked at the fear in his eyes. She realized that Terrance was right. Karma hadn't just hit him. It had erased him. He was a ghost haunting his own life. She could have gloated. She could have demanded to see a manager. She could have laughed. Instead, Vivienne Caldwell adjusted her hat, her expression unreadable. "I need a 20-inch wiper blade for a 1969 280 SL, she said calmly. "Do you have them in stock?" Wade blinked, stunned by her composure. Yes, ma'am. Aisle 4. "Thank you," she said. She walked past him. She didn't flinch. She didn't look back. She bought the blade from the cashier and walked out to her car. As she drove away, she looked in the rearview mirror. Wade was standing by the window, watching her go. He looked small. He looked insignificant. Vivienne turned the corner and the auto parts store disappeared from view. She drove towards the cemetery. When she arrived at Reginald's grave, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the grass. She placed a fresh bouquet of white lilies on the stone. "Hello, Reggie," she whispered. "It's been quite a year." She touched the cold granite. "You always told me that the truth is a lion," she smiled, a tear tracing a path down her cheek. "You don't have to defend it. You just have to let it loose." She stood there for a long time, the wind rustling the trees. The town of Silverlake was quiet. The corruption was gone, scrubbed away by the light of day. And as Vivienne got back into her car and started the engine, she felt a profound sense of peace. The war was over. The Queen was still standing. So what's the lesson here? It's simple. Power isn't about the badge on your chest or the gun on your hip. True power is dignity. True power is knowing exactly who you are, so that when someone tries to strip you of your rights, you don't just survive it, you dismantle them. Wade Harlan thought he was hunting a weak, elderly woman. He didn't realize he was poking a sleeping dragon. He forgot the golden rule. Respect everyone because you never know who you're talking to. If this story fired you up, if you believe in justice served cold and karma hitting hard, then do me a huge favor. Smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder that the good guys still win sometimes. And if you haven't already, subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss a story. Thanks for watching, and stay safe out.